Alright everybody, welcome back to Only Divergences. In this video I will be initiating coverage on Alphabet, ticker symbol GOOG. It's the old Google. Now I'm not going to have a rating or a price target or anything like that. I think that those conventions are actually quite stupid in any market, but especially the one that we're in today. Coverage just means ongoing analysis of the technicals and the potential that I see, but what I want to emphasize in this video and what I want to point out is something that I've noticed in the technicals of this stock in particular that is both rare, significant, and somewhat terrifying. So if you watch any of the videos that I posted this weekend, it should be this one. Today is Sunday, October 10th, 2021, and we are taking a look at Alphabet. I'm going to be calling it Google from now on. So with some stocks, I look at the chart and I'm comfortable providing a statement that is very precise like I did with last week's QQQ trade, but other times I look at a chart and I just want to describe what I see and what I'm most certain about and then walk back from that. So with Google, what the technicals tell me that I can state with a relatively high degree of confidence is two things. And as I mentioned, these I want you to listen to with a critical ear. Do not assume that what I'm saying is right, but I need you to try to poke holes into this theory because no analysis is perfect. Okay, so first, we can say with confidence that we're not at the start. We're not at the potential start of a rally, right? I would say that that's rather axiomatic. We can see that we've moved here. Okay, let's just provide context. Okay, Google has almost tripled in less than 2 years. It started down here at just over 1,000, and it peaked out just below 3,000. Okay, now prior to this move, something I want to point out is that Google actually consolidated for almost 3 years, essentially. Okay, you can see that this low here, March 2020, was first hit back here in December. Oh, well, we can go all the way to November 2017. So if you bought here, you got nothing for almost 3 years, even though there were some rallies along the way. But 3 years later, you ended up here, and that's a return of nothing. This move here, across, which visited this level, the $1,000 level, many times, is in stark contrast to this move here. You see? This move here, which never looked back and proceeded to continue to break new all-time highs. Never went back and touched this level, whereas this time we did. So we can say that we have just had a rally and are not at the start of it. So if we know for sure that we are not at the start of a rally, the question then becomes, obviously, whether we are at the end of a rally, because we could be, at the middle of one. And what obviously follows from that question is what happens to the stock if we indeed are at the end of a rally. To answer that, we can go to our second statement about Google that we can say with confidence, and that is objectively, the current rally, or at least the momentum that's supporting it, has reached a relative limit. Now, this is a strong statement to make, and thus, to support it, I have to outline objective measures that I believe paint a picture of a rally that has ended. Now, I will say this has just been an absolute beautiful rally. This was a juggernaut. Now, within this move, we see there were pullbacks, right? That's natural and expected. But one thing is that none of these pullbacks really compromised the overall trend. We see on the MACD, we had, if you ignored this little blip here, which was at the beginning of this move, we basically had positive histogram. See this green here? And it's been sloping upward and moving upward since the bottom. We can also see here we have an elevated red and a low green, and the area between them was expanding, but now it's come and closed down. And also this black, which represents trend strength, it looks like it's peaked, and it's now starting to turn down. And we can see that this MACD move and this DMI move has been maintained and not compromised until this most recent pullback. We can see the MACD has flipped over. See? It was moving higher, and now it's flipped over. It's sloping down, and the negative histogram here is very clear and present, and more importantly, it's just getting started, it looks like. The DMI shows here this long trend with elevated red, low green, and elevated black having changed materially here. Something has changed here, right? This was already testing the limits of how far this trend can go. I mean, what is black just going to continue? Is MACD just going to continue on higher forever? So if we assume here that this signals the end, which we generally should because that's what we've seen from DMI, then we can assume then that we're past the peak and the path of least resistance ultimately is lower. Now I say assumed peak because I want you to envision a MACD that has been one-sided for so long and then flip over. I want you to try to envision this maintaining itself up here or even going higher. Like, if this trend were to come to an end, if there ever were a place for this trend to come to an end, it would be when we have this objective measure of the weekly MACD flipping over, along with the DMI here showing a peak with black already hitting its high and coming down. Now this does not mean that there will be a crash, but I would say that after a rally like this, a period of at least consolidation and at most a material crash would not be surprising. Remember, before this rally, we had a big consolidation period, right? Before this rally, big consolidation period. And before this consolidation period, well, we had a pretty big rally. From 2015 to 2018, right? From 500 to 1200. So we can see that this is a pattern that repeats itself. These are big patterns that repeat themselves. But above all, I want to emphasize that these technical indicators that show the presence of a strong and long trend, and this change in the momentum indicators recently, objectively, I would say this indicates the end of this 18-month trend. And so it would mean that Google may have lower prices from here on out. Like, look at this MACD. Look at how high it is. Okay, look at this. We have to accept the possibility that in the coming weeks and months, the MACD reverts to the mean, coming back down at least to the midline here, and at worst, below it. And that would mean that price naturally would have to come lower as well. So if we accept this premise, I would think this would objectively give us an ultimate downside target of the 200-week moving average, as was the case back here. Now that doesn't mean it's going to happen, in the next week, next month, or even the next year. Let's not forget that this consolidation period was years long. And as in all markets, there will be rallies and bounces, but we have to be careful and watch whether this trend reversal continues and even deepens, as I fear it may happen. One of the reasons why I decided to cover this and why I think it's significant is because this would mean that Google ultimately does go lower in the coming weeks and months, and if it does, then axiomatically the market would have to go lower as well. Now, this is the broad setup on the weekly showing what looks like the end of a weekly trend of momentum thrust within that trend, and that sets up the context for a look down at the daily chart. But before we go, I just want to point out this obvious trend break on this rather thin rally. So we can just draw here again. We held here for, well, when did that start? Well, last year or the beginning of this year. And we just held and we just broke it. So again, just more evidence suggesting everything was front-loaded for the stock and now the chickens may be coming home to roost. Remember the old saying, the trend is your friend until the end when it bends. And Google has just bent. So I will say that even with the stark context that I just outlined, the daily looks relatively better. We see the stock has just bounced off of its 100-day EMA. And the bounce was relatively strong, but we really are at least a near-term precipice, and that is because you can see we bounced right into this this potential downward sloping resistance, right? You can see this popped up a bit above it a little bit. It's not perfect, but if there ever was a place for a reversal, I think it would be here. Actually, looking at this right now, this doesn't look as good because, again, I'm back to this meat of the bone theory. Right after a bounce like this that we had last week, how much more upside is there, especially as we come up to downward sloping resistance after having broken a major trend line? So this is a little concerning, and if we go into the hourly, which I'm just going to do quickly here, we can see the dilemma a little clearer, right? So I guess we can pull this just about here. Again, not perfect, but I'd say close enough. So we can see it's moved up from its low quite a bit. It's hit resistance. In fact, you can argue it's hit it twice, and it's still below it. And most importantly, we are below the dominant trend line, as I outlined earlier, right? So one way of looking at this trend is that when you are above it, you buy the dips, and when you're below it, you sell the rips. We've just had a rip, and we've run into resistance. Look, even above the trend, you sell some rips. So it's not crazy to make a claim that there is potential for a move lower here. Now, the obvious counter to that is that if we could just get above this level, we could continue with this uptrend, or, you know, we have somewhat of a head and shoulders sort of thing here, right? We do come down, but then we continue higher. But overall, we have to remember the weekly charts that I showed, showing this trend, or at least the momentum of it having peaked. So it is possible that if we get the right signals I'm looking for, this could be a potential trade to go short early this week, in fact. But I don't see it completely just yet, and I want to get this video out, so that's as far as I will go and say about the stock for now. No official trade, but we have to be open to various potential outcomes. The takeaway from this video you should have is that Google has been in a trend, and it looks like that trend may be over, and I hypothesize that once a trend is over, it takes a long time for a stock to right itself, and the longer and the thinner the trend, the longer it takes to resume once broken. So Google's behavior over the next few weeks and months will be very interesting to study from a technical perspective, because we are testing this hypothesis of long-term trend breaks. Now, I think you know what my bias is, but in order to learn, we have to look past our biases and only at the chart in front of us, and this one should be interesting. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this informative. I will likely update this either next week or maybe earlier if I do choose to go short, or long for that matter. I'll see you in the other videos I'm putting out today or after the close on Monday. Take care, guys.